Hello all, this is James Johnson, aka Sulfur Played. This will be different content. This is politically charged content. This is about basically how Trump is going to win the next election and why I think Trump's going to win the next election. And I think what it boils down to is more about the culture war that's going on in the world and less about politics. I think it's more about tribalism. Democrats, specifically the feminists, SJWs, and the woke, who are the loudest, worst section of the Democrat Party, who are basically putting all the rest of us into boxes. They're assigning all the rest of us into these tribes. And they've been doing it for many years now. They've been doing it for so long that some of us have just accepted the tribes that we've put into. Some of us have just accepted that we're angry, toxic, white people, men, angry, toxic, white men who are uneducated voters, and, you know, that's who we are, according to the feminist SJW woke. We are rural Americans. We're dumb Americans. We're not educated, which is just actually pretty comical. Dollar for dollar, rural Americans have better education funding and have better teachers and have better grades than metropolitan America. There are more metropolitan Americans who are left behind in the classroom, so to speak, who are stuck in poorly financed schools and have underperforming grades than in rural America. Rural America is, quote unquote, better educated. But hey, we're the dumb ones, right? Who would have known? So let's look at some of these fancy graphics I put up here. You'll notice Doctor Who, Star Trek, Star Wars, Thundercats. What's that all about? So what is that? I'll tell you what that's about. That is the culture war battlegrounds as far as Hollywood goes, right? So many of us are sick and tired of seeing our favorite cultural things ruined on the altar of identity politics or pushing some sort of political narrative. Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, even cartoons like Thundercats and She-Ra have been ruined by woke Hollywood elites, woke Hollywood feminists, woke Hollywood SJWs, trying to push narratives down our throats inside of our entertainment media. That is supposed to be entertainment media. It's supposed to be stuff we watch to enjoy, not to get a political message forced down our throat. It's bad enough that the blue check marks on Twitter throw us into our boxes. It's bad enough that there's so many different avenues on the internet for people to throw us into our boxes. It's bad enough that Access Media throws us into our tribal boxes. But when we have to be thrown into our tribal boxes when we're watching movies, it's just gone too far. It's crazy. I just don't even understand the world anymore. How have I become an ultra-conservative? I used to be a moderate. And it's just because I'm more and more alienated by the left. The left keeps pushing me away, keeps shoving me away, keeps making me think that they're frickin' nuts. And I think they are. I mean, so back in my day, Ted Kennedy was freaking nuts, right? He was as far left as it got, and Rush Limbaugh was about as far right as it got. And that was your political spectrum. You fell somewhere between Ted Kennedy and Rush Limbaugh. Now, in today's day and age, we have Bernie Sanders, who is more left than Ted Kennedy. Bernie Sanders is an actual socialist. We have AOC, the new junior congressman who thinks she's the Speaker of the House, threatening to primary people if they don't step in line and vote her way, who is like following on the footsteps and the heels of Bernie Sanders, who is lining up and believing herself to be the next coming of the Socialist Party. So it's like there's a new party forming on the extreme left that's taking control of the Democrats. The AOCs and the Bernies are even crazier than Nancy Pelosi's generation of Democrats. They were like Ted Kennedy crazy. And now we've gone beyond Ted Kennedy crazy into a new spectrum of insanity. And there's actually support. Bernie Sanders actually has support because colleges are educating our young people with all of these wonderful elective classes. So colleges on a whole, if you were to take serious classes, like classes that matter, not counting electives, you would have kind of a 40-60 split between conservative professors and liberal professors. By and large, on the whole, the people that want to go into education tend to be a little more left hemisphere. They tend to be a little more artsy-fartsy. They tend to be a little more liberal. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, the world needs artists. The world needs singers. The world needs creative people. Creative people are important for a healthy, balanced world. But when the majority of professors in college are left, and that becomes very skewed when you start to factor in electives, because almost 99% of elective professors are liberal, because most electives are weird artsy-fartsy type categories, like, you know, what are some of them? Film, for instance. You sit around and you review movies and talk about lighting and key shade and shading and blah 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 blah, and it's just the most pointless, stupid class. It's a waste of your money. You actually have to pay for these elective classes because you actually have to have so many electives in order to graduate. So this garbage stuff is forced down your throat, and it's those types of classes where liberal professors or liberal teachers can really get on their high horses and start pushing political agenda, because heck, it could be politics. I mean, I think there's even electives that is about politics. And so yeah, our young generation is getting brainwashed by an overwhelming majority of liberal professors in colleges. And now they're like the Bernie bandwagon. They're completely ready to jump on board with socialism, and it just makes me do a face palm. It's like, really? Really? Are there that many confused Americans that don't understand how good capitalism is? Don't understand Winston Churchill's quote when he said, how do you put it? Democracy is the best form of government. No, the worst form of government until you take into consideration of all the other forms of government, which is really, it's a quote that makes so much sense. Everyone in the world wants to be, who is not in a democracy, wishes they were part of a democracy. Almost never do you have someone in a socialist country. Like, talk to people in Venezuela. They can tell you all about how great the world of socialism is. Talk to people in Brazil. They could tell you about how great it was when they used to be a socialist country. Brazil is starting to rebound, and they've climbed out of that hole that they put themselves in, because for a while there, several countries were going over to, and now the U.S., but a lot of people fell down the socialist rabbit hole. And, you could almost blame some of my favorite entertainment growing up. Star Trek, for instance. Star Trek was a very utopian society. Star Trek The Next Generation had very utopian ideals, and everyone was equal, and you had happiness, and we had progressed beyond money, and the whole thing behind Star Trek was, the Federation was socialism or communism, some form of socialist communism done right. And, well, that's in an ideal world, because Star Trek Star Trek is set in an ideal utopian world. Humanity has not progressed to the point to where the Federation and the Federation ideals would actually work on this planet. We don't have, replicators that can, queue up our cup of Earl Grey coffee whenever we want, or Earl Grey tea whenever we want, or we could just, queue up a steak at the request of the computer. Hey, computer, can I have a steak medium rare, please? Sure, what type of steak? Oh, yeah, ribeye. It would be wonderful if we lived in that type of magical world, but we don't. So we live in a world where material things are sadly important, where working to make money is, something you do. Well, something most people do. There are some people who choose not to work and then live on the government dime, or the taxpayers' dime, all the people who are working hard so that the other people can sit at home and not work. But I digress. I'm not going to talk about that right now. Anyway, so in a way, Star Trek could kind of be blamed for some of these left-wing ideas, because it was a very popular show, and it gave lots of people great ideas. And that's funny. That is really funny when you had this poster child for the Dems in Star Trek. I don't know what show they could have used that could have promoted their values better than Star Trek. And here, Hollywood and Hollywood elites are ruining Star Trek. They're destroying Gene Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek, so that they can interject identity politics. So it's like taking what was their poster child, what could have been the thing that caused the most people to go extreme socialist, and they're destroying it to push feminist, SJW, woke, identity politics ideals. And it just kind of makes me scratch my head. It's like, you guys aren't very smart here. You had a show that was timeless, that helps your party. Everything about Star Trek helps Democrats. But they're destroying Star Trek. And so now, the more they destroy Star Trek, the more they kind of destroy one of the things that people could look at on TV that kind of creates the base of what a Democrat should be, I suppose. But I'm rambling here. Not sure if I'm even making sense at this point, but some of you might understand what I'm saying. Anyway, up off to the right there, I have a listing of basically how I've voted for president since I was able to vote. So we have Bush Sr. there that I voted for, and then I voted again for Bush Sr., who lost to Clinton. Clinton beat Bush Sr. in '92. And then I voted for Clinton because I thought Clinton did such a great job in his first term, and because I was a moderate back then who kind of leaned to the left, I actually considered myself more Democrat than Republican at that point in time. I had no problems re-electing Clinton. I thought Clinton was an amazing president at that point in time. And then Bush Jr. ran as the quote-unquote education president. He ran as a fiscal conservative. He was going to continue Clinton's trend of helping to pay down the deficit and balance our budget, but his primary focus was education. Education was the key. Education, education, education. And he was so full of crap. He was not a fiscal president, and he was not the education president. He was the president that started us into this insurmountable debt that, Obama carried on. But I digress. So yeah, I voted for Bush in 2000. Then in 2004, I voted against him. I voted for John Edwards in the primary because I wanted John Edwards to be the Democratic Party, but ended up voting for Kerry because Edwards didn't get the ticket. Then in 2008, again, I voted for Edwards during the primary, but he didn't win again. Got beat out by Obama. So I voted for McCain, and then I voted for Romney. And then finally, in 2016, I voted for Gary Johnson. I voted for Gary Johnson because I was absolutely convinced that Donald Trump was a madman. I was absolutely convinced that Donald Trump was a racist, a sexist. Axis Media had me completely snowed. The mob mentality had me completely snowed. I was a believer that Trump was a bad man in 2016. Because let's face it, Trump is not the most charismatic person. Trump doesn't sound very educated when he talks. He's got his own very strange form of charisma, and can be a little bit cringy at times when he talks. But yeah, I voted for Gary Johnson because I sure the heck wasn't going to vote for Hillary Clinton. No way. And then 2020, I'm voting for Trump, no doubt about it, because just like Clinton earned my vote in '96, Trump has earned my vote in 2020. Trump has been an amazing president these last 4 years. While In 2016, Axis Media had me convinced that he was a babbling buffoon, had me convinced that he was a sexist, has me convinced that he was all these bad things. I've now figured out that no, that's just not the case. I fell for the propaganda that Axis Media was tossing down my throats. Trump's been a great president. So yeah, no problem voting for him in 2020. In fact, I think Trump is part of the cultural war. I think he is part of getting people to wake up and open up their eyes about this cultural war that we're in. With the feminist, SJW, woke, Hollywood elites, Axis Media, trying to dictate this narrative, throw us all into these little tribal boxes, and pit us all against each other, and we all have to play by their rules because they set the rules. You have to refer to people this way, and you have to say that, and you can't hurt little Johnny's feelings, and I think people are just finally sick of dealing with identity politics. We're finally sick of dealing with the SJWs. We're finally realizing that the Axis Media is a bunch of phony shills that you can't trust. CNN, MSNBC, NBC, CBS are all full of frickin' propaganda. That's not to say that Fox doesn't lean conservative. Fox most certainly leans conservative, but the news isn't the news anymore. You can't watch the news and expect to get the news. You watch the news and you expect to get whatever company's backing that particular news agency's political beliefs. And that's the truth. So yeah, where am I rambling with this? So you also see this graph here. The red is the ultra crazy liberals. The blue is the ultra fanatical conservatives. And in 2020, I'm part of that box. The feminist SJW woke Hollywood elites, the Axis Media, the blue check marks on Twitter have made sure that I recognize myself as part of the ultra-conservative Republican Party. In 2010, I wasn't that far gone. In 2000, I was a moderate. In 1990, I was a moderate Democrat. But the craziest, most extreme Democrats have been pushing all the rest of us farther down the spectrum towards the blue. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the yellow is now green and a lot of the green is now blue. I think the entire spectrum has just been shifted over. Rural Americans are by far more blue. There's no doubt about that, because I don't think it's as easy for feminist SJW woke media crap to work in rural America. It's far easier to get away with that identity politics stuff inside of the metropolitan area. Metropolitan America is just filled with crazy Democrats. And they call us the dumb, uneducated voters. Anyway, so we've got AOC and Bernie who are taking the Democrat Party into new left socialist territory, which has me just scratching my head. How can that be? Why have colleges gone so crazily liberal? Why? Well, we know it's because of the I just can't think right now. It's because of the those extra useless classes that you don't want to take, that you have to spend money on, and you have to get in order to get a degree. But electives, all those useless electives that are filled with all those crazy liberal-minded professors that just kind of indoctrinate our young people into believing that, to kind of worshiping at the altar of liberalism. I mean, it should be wrong to have, but I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how you, well, actually I do know how to fix it. We need to get rid of electives. I don't even see the point in electives, to be honest. What are the point of electives other than to cost you more in your education dollar? Why should I have to go to college and I have to take these elective classes? What do I care about movie theory? I mean, really, why should I have to pay for these stupid electives just to get a degree? It's never made any sense to me. But it is... It creates a pedestal. It creates a pedestal for liberal professors to indoctrinate our youth into liberal ideas. That's what electives do. Anyway, let's continue on in this slideshow. There's actually more to it. So here we are, just kind of highlighting the difference between rural America and city America. So remember, Illinois has Chicago, and Chicago swings Illinois. Whoever wins Chicago wins Illinois, so that's why Illinois is blue. Minnesota, it's got a lot more rural support, but Minneapolis-St. Paul is a big enough city that it can push Minnesota one way or the other. Colorado, again, Denver. Denver is pretty much, if you win Denver, you win Colorado. And New Mexico, I don't have an answer for New Mexico, to be honest. New Mexico is just strange. It's not like there's a huge metropolitan in New Mexico, really, that swings the state. Nevada, you have Los Angeles. Oregon, you have Portland, Salem. Most of your people in Oregon are along the coast, inside of metropolitans. Washington, you have Seattle. California, you have San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego. Again, those are all big cities that, well, they make for democratic fortresses, if you will. Hard to swing those states for a Republican. Now, there are big cities in Texas, no doubt about it. You got Houston, Dallas, but you have a lot of rural Texans, though, too. A lot more people spread out around Texas. Like Wisconsin and Michigan, Detroit has lost a lot of its people. You got far more rural Michiganians now than you do what used to be in Detroit. Ohio has several kind of larger cities. It's got again, people are pretty spread out in Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee. Most of these states have a lot of spread out population. That's, it's across the board. It's not being concentrated in one area. Where New York, you've got New York. You've got a huge concentration in a city. New Jersey, you have a huge concentration in New Jersey. I don't know what things are like in Virginia. I suppose Virginia has just got that whole East Coast thing, right? Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, they all are just always kind of crazily Democratic. I'm not sure if Virginia is usually that way, but I think it might be historically blue. But yeah, so basically what you see here is really rural America versus metropolitan America. That is what that is. Technically, Clinton won the populist vote. And I've heard all of this whining and bitching and crying about how unfair it is, blah, 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 blah. But if we had just a populist vote election, people would, politicians would, they would basically do all of their campaigning in Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Houston, Dallas, and that's pretty much it. Any city with 1 million plus people, you can expect to see the politicians show up. Otherwise, you want some representation? You want people to elect you? You want have your voice heard? Oh, that's funny. No, if we had a populist vote, the only voice that would matter are those that live in the cities. Now, you can spin that however you want, but that's the truth. If you want a populist vote, the only voices that matter are in the cities. Right now, because of the Electoral College, people in the country's voices matter. And the people in the city want to claim that the country voices matter more. But do they? Do they really? I don't think so. Texas. Texas has several big cities. Houston, Dallas. If you would have won more in Texas, if you would have carried your cities in Texas, if Clinton would have gotten Texas, that would have been what? 270. And what would Trump have had? Less than 270. Hillary wins. So city folk in Texas abandoned city folk across the rest of the country. So it was rural Americans and city folk in Texas who voted for Trump. So no, it's not that country folk matter more than city folk. It's that some of your city folk abandoned you. And I don't feel so bad about it. The Electoral College works. It's a good system. It needs to stay. Populist vote would not work. A populist vote would lead to, again, politicians would only campaign in the big cities, and the people in the big cities would be the only people whose opinion mattered. All right, so I showed, if we back up here, we have the feminist SJW woke who like to put everyone into boxes. The toxic men, the white people, the uneducated voters, those are all Republicans, right? If you're a toxic man, if you don't side with the feminist SJW woke narrative, you must be Republican. You're over there. You're one of those evil people. Well, here's Ricky Gervais. Ricky Gervais tore Hollywood a new a-hole the other day during the Golden Globes, and he let the Hollywood elites have it. Told them how out of touch with reality they were. And the woke Axis media, they want to claim that Ricky Gervais is an evil conservative. They want to claim that he's a right-winger. But they can't. Because he's liberal. He's a Democrat. He's a registered Democrat. He has railed against Trump several times. but he's going to do more to help Trump get elected than most of those Hollywood elites could have done to help Trump not get elected. So you could take a Tom Hanks, and he could stump and get out there and try to collect as many votes as he wanted for Bernie or Warren or whoever the Democrats end up throwing against Trump. It doesn't matter. Ricky Gervais, he helped in the war that matters, the cultural war, the war against identity politics, the war against the crazy core of the Democratic Party, even though he's a Democrat, even though he's probably a moderate. He's probably a moderate Democrat who's now going to get pushback. He's going to get shoved further down the spectrum toward the Republican side by his buddies. And maybe Ricky Gervais, maybe he might be a Republican in 10 or 20 years from now, but for right now he still recognizes himself as a Democrat. But his impact in the cultural war is going to help make the difference for Trump. Terry Gilliam, well known for Monty Python. He's also a very left-leaning individual. However, he's tired of identity politics. He's come out and railed against the crazy SJW woke Hollywood elites. And he is getting attacked by the crazy left. Because he's not crazy enough left. He's sensible, moderate left. This is another person playing a key war in the cultural war who the crazy left would, if they could, call him an ultra-conservative, a bad guy. But sadly, they can't because, like Ricky Gervais, his political affiliation is well known. Like Ricky Gervais's political affiliation is well known. However, let's take a look at the next person. Next person is another key figure in the cultural war. Great man right here. Jordan Peterson is... If you were to Google Jordan Peterson, you would have several links that would pop up, and many of the links would probably say right-wing ultra-conservative, which is just freaking comical. So first off, he's not a Democrat or Republican because he's not from the U.S., he's Canadian. Right? And so Canada has kind of different political parties than we do. They've got liberals and they have conservatives. But Mr. Peterson here, he recognizes himself as a British liberal or a traditionalist. So he is on the liberal side of the spectrum. He self-identifies on the liberal side of the spectrum. But he is put on the political spectrum so far to the right by the crazy SJWs and the woke and, you know, the people that want to put everyone in a box, the people that throw everyone into these tribalist box. They label him all the time as an ultra-right-wing conservative. And he's not. He just isn't. He's just a person with common sense. Just like Terry Gilliam, even though he's a moderate, Democrat, or Well, he's British, but actually, is he British? Either him or John Cleese. Okay, he was American that became British. Anyway, so he does have liberal leanings, basically, and everyone knows this, and he's well known. His politics are well known that way. But he said things that make common sense, that go against the far left, just like Ricky Gervais. Again, a Democrat. So just because you say things that make sense doesn't make you an ultra-conservative, but sadly for Mr. Peterson, he's an ultra-conservative. Or at least, according to the tribal box makers, he's an ultra-conservative. And then we have the battlegrounds of the cultural war. Star Wars, Rise of the Skywalker. Horrible, trash movie which really, in and of itself, this movie wasn't really about identity politics. This movie was bad just because it was a bad movie that tried to do far too much, tried to fix far too much. I don't know as if anybody could have fixed this movie to have been good, but with Kathleen Kennedy at the helm, there was no way that this was going to ever be a good movie, because Kathleen Kennedy believes the Force is female. Then we have Solo, Star Wars movie that lost money. Gotta remember, Solo lost money. And that's just unheard of for anything in Star Wars. And remember, we had Lando Calrissian in the Solo movie, who's pansexual. That's right, he loved robots. Because that's what we need to see in our entertainment, is pansexuals. And then we have Star Wars The Last Jedi, where the real identity politics really started to hit the fan. This is where Star Wars really went south. And The Rise of Skywalker was just a flat bad movie. Star Wars The Last Jedi was just a flat bad movie because of identity politics. So this is the cultural type battleground that we're dealing with, and when you're dealing with, Star Wars is a big deal for a lot of people. Star Wars is no little thing, and when you throw Star Trek, Doctor Who, Thundercats, and all the rest of it on top of it, Ghostbusters, I could keep naming stuff, crap, Hollywood crap. Terminator, the latest Terminator movie that completely flopped. Again, more Hollywood attempts to throw identity politics into movies that just are failing. And they are failing. These movies are failing because the cultural war is being won by the fandom. The fandom is winning the cultural war, but sadly, the fandom has been being put in the Republican box for many years now. Gillette, the best a man can get. We remember what happened when Gillette decided to lecture men about toxic masculinity. Gillette lost billions of dollars when they decided to lecture men about toxic masculinity. So the cultural war is being won by the sensible side. The moderate individuals, the sane people are winning this cultural war. But those moderate, sane individuals have been pushed into the blue by the craziest parts of the red for a long time now. That I predict Trump is going to have a landslide victory this year. Not just a victory, not just a victory by pulling off a win in the Electoral College. I predict a landslide populist vote in Trump's favor. Because I predict a message being sent to the extreme left that moderate, sensible people are just fed up with the culture war. And I think that's going to sway more of the vote this year than the actual politics are. That's not to say that the impeachment isn't going to have part to do with it, but the impeachment is kind of like taking the political portion of the culture war and merging it together with the culture war. The impeachment by the House is kind of like the embodiment of the stupidity that people are sick of in this cultural war. It is pure partisanship. It is pure wasted time. We know the impeachment is just a bunch of hogwash. We know it's wasting taxpayers' money. We know it's a waste of time. We know what it is. It's clear as day that the Democrats are making a stupid decision to go ahead and push this impeachment. So I think the impeachment, tied together with the ongoing culture war that's going on in the world, when you tie the culture war together with the impeachment is the same stupidity that we deal with when the feminists, SJW, woke, Hollywood elites, access media try to push, identity politics down our throats in movies. Now we have the Democrats trying to push an impeachment of a president who didn't break any flipping laws at all down our throats. Yeah. The crazy red. The crazy red is just yeah, they're out there. They're gone. Their ship is sailing. They have destroyed themselves. They have done more to destroy themselves than the Republicans have done to create themselves. Trump is going to have a landslide victory, not because he was a great president this last 4 years, not because Republicans are a great party. Trump is going to have a landslide victory because the Democrats have just completely self-destructed. The feminist SJW, woke Hollywood, access media elites in Disney ruining all of our movies, that throwing all the identity politics into our movies is just going to wash out the politics. It's putting the feminist SJW woke craziness front and center as the primary problem in the world today. Nothing trumps it. Nothing is worse than the feminist SJW woke people. The normal parts of society, the normal people in society, we're done with them. We're sick of them. We don't want anything more to do with them. And voting for Trump is going to make them cry. And you can expect we're going to enjoy watching them cry after we vote for Trump. Anyway, I'm James Johnson, aka Sulfur Blade. Hopefully some of this craziness that I'm going on about here, talking about, is going to make sense to you. If so, if you enjoyed this content, please leave a like and subscribe. And until the next time, all, peace.